In early 2022, while the world was focused on Russia's invasion of Ukraine, a far quieter announcement emerged from the Caucasus. In South Ossetia, a small disputed territory wedged into Georgia's northern mountains, local leaders signaled that another border in Europe might soon be rewritten. The region's president at the time, Anatoly Bibilov, publicly declared that South Ossetia's future lay with Russia, framing the moment as the end of separation and the start of permanent unity. Soon after, authorities revealed plans for a referendum that would ask residents a direct question: should South Ossetia formally become part of the Russian Federation? The timing raised eyebrows. The Ukraine war was not yet 3 months old, and Moscow was already facing sweeping sanctions and global condemnation. Yet here was the possibility of another territorial shift, one that echoed earlier episodes in Russia's post-Soviet history. Then, almost as quickly as the plan appeared, it unraveled. Bibilov lost his re-election campaign, and his successor, Alan Gagluyev, moved to halt the referendum altogether, arguing that legal and procedural obstacles made it untenable. The vote never happened. But the message it sent, to Georgia, to NATO, and to the wider international community, had already been delivered. Moscow's initial reaction was cautious and ambiguous. This was still the early phase of the Ukraine war, and Russia appeared unwilling to publicly commit to further escalation. At the same time, Georgia, feeling increasingly vulnerable, accelerated its long-standing efforts to join NATO. That, for Russia, crossed a familiar red line. In August 2022, Dmitry Medvedev, deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council, issued a blunt warning. He stated that popular support for joining Russia was strong in both South Ossetia and Abkhazia, and if circumstances made it unavoidable, Moscow would act. The implication was clear. NATO expansion into Georgia would trigger consequences. South Ossetia and Abkhazia lie along Georgia's northern frontier. South Ossetia covers roughly 1,500 square miles and has a population of about 55,000. Abkhazia, located along the Black Sea coast, is far more strategically significant. It spans over 3,300 square miles and has a population of roughly 250,000. Together, these two regions account for just over 18% of Georgia's internationally recognized territory. Their disputed status dates back to the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. Georgia considers both regions integral parts of its sovereign territory, a position widely supported by the international community. South Ossetia and Abkhazia, however, claim independence as separate republics. A small group of countries, including Russia, Syria, Venezuela, and Nicaragua, recognized their independence after the 2008 Russia-Georgia War. In practice, both regions are entirely dependent on Russia. Their economies rely on Russian aid, their security is guaranteed by Russian forces, and most residents hold Russian passports. Moscow has not formally annexed them, but Russian influence and control are pervasive. To understand how these breakaway regions emerged and why Russia supports them, we need to go back nearly 1,000 years. The Georgian kingdom first emerged in the Caucasus in the 11th century. From the beginning, it was multi-ethnic. Alongside ethnic Georgians lived Abkhazians on the Black Sea coast and Ossetians in the northern highlands. The Ossetians were of mixed Iranian and Caucasian origin, having migrated into the region around the 8th or 9th century. Despite linguistic differences, these groups coexisted within the same kingdom. They shared cultural ties and lived without major conflict. During the 12th and 13th centuries, Georgia reached its peak, expanding across much of the Caucasus. That unity was shattered by successive invasions. Mongol armies devastated the region, followed in the 14th century by the campaigns of the Turco-Mongol conqueror Timur, further fragmenting Georgian statehood. By the 17th century, the region had become a battleground between two Muslim empires. The Ottomans dominated western Georgia and the Black Sea coast, while eastern Georgia fell under Persian influence. In the 18th century, a third power entered the contest: the Russian Empire. Over decades of warfare against the Ottomans and Persians, Russia gradually absorbed the Caucasus. By the 19th century, the entire region was under Russian control. But the local populations responded differently. The Ossetians generally aligned themselves with Russia and actively supported Russian campaigns. Georgians initially resisted direct Russian rule, but gradually accepted it. Abkhazians, however, strongly opposed Russian domination. Because Abkhazia sat on the strategically vital Black Sea coast, Russia responded harshly, displacing much of the local population and resettling loyal groups, including Russians, Armenians, and Georgians, to reshape the region's demographics. By World War I, Russia had a firm grip on the area, but the war weakened the Russian Empire, triggering revolution and civil war. During this chaos, Georgia declared independence in 1918. That declaration unleashed ethnic tensions. Abkhazians and Ossetians, shaped by centuries of shifting imperial rule, strongly opposed Georgian dominance. When the Bolsheviks emerged victorious, the Red Army reasserted control over Georgia. In 1922, as the Soviet Union was formed, new internal borders were drawn. Abkhazia was initially declared a separate republic, but later downgraded to an autonomous region within Soviet Georgia. South Ossetia was also placed inside Georgia, while North Ossetia, part of the same historic Ossetian homeland, remained within Russia. This is why South Ossetia lies north of much of Georgia. These arrangements satisfied no one, but as long as the Soviet Union held together, they remained manageable. That balance collapsed in the late 1980s as nationalism surged across the Soviet Union. In 1991, Georgia declared independence, without the consent of Abkhazia or South Ossetia. Civil war followed. Abkhazia sought full independence, while South Ossetia debated either independence or unification with Russia via North Ossetia. Both regions received support from armed groups across the Caucasus. Fighting ended in the early 1990s through Russian mediation, with Russian peacekeepers deployed on the ground. Both regions declared independence, but almost no country recognized them. Even Russia, under President Boris Yeltsin, stopped short of full support, wary of alienating Georgia. That changed after Vladimir Putin came to power in 2000. Moscow began backing both regions more aggressively and pressured Georgia to abandon its NATO ambitions. After the pro-Western Rose Revolution in 2003, Georgian President Mikhail Saakashvili openly pursued NATO membership and vowed to reintegrate the breakaway regions, offering them expanded autonomy within Georgia. Both rejected the proposal. Georgia responded with crackdowns, tensions escalated, and relations with Russia deteriorated further. The breaking point came in 2008, when a NATO summit formally welcomed Georgia's aspiration to join the alliance. For Russia, this was unacceptable. Violence intensified. Georgian forces advanced into South Ossetia. On August 8, 2008, Russian forces intervened. Within days, Russian troops and local militias pushed deep into Georgian-controlled territory from both Abkhazia and South Ossetia. After 5 days of intense fighting, a ceasefire brokered by France took effect on August 12, 2008. Russian forces pulled back from most Georgian territory but stayed firmly entrenched inside South Ossetia and Abkhazia. Within weeks, Moscow went a step further, formally recognizing both regions as independent states. Georgia reacted with fury. Then-President Mikhail Saakashvili accused Russia of attempting to redraw Europe's borders by force, calling it an act of lawlessness that shattered the foundations of the post-Cold War order. He warned that this was no longer just a dispute between Georgia and Russia, but a challenge to the wider international system, one that tested whether borders in Europe could still be changed through military power. Georgia's foreign ministry echoed that message, describing Russia's move as a blatant annexation carried out under the guise of recognition. The 2008 conflict is often described as Europe's first war of the 21st century. An estimated 200,000 civilians were displaced, though many later returned. In the years since, South Ossetia and Abkhazia have functioned as de facto Russian protectorates. Russian troops, estimated at up to 10,000, remain stationed there, and both regions survive largely on Russian financial support, reinforcing a reality on the ground that Georgia and most of the world continue to reject. Public support for Russia exists in both regions, but it is strongest in South Ossetia. Its population feels closely tied to Russia due to shared ethnicity with North Ossetia and long-standing political alignment. So could Russia formally annex these territories, as it did with Crimea in 2014? Most analysts believe the chances are low. Annexation would almost certainly trigger severe international sanctions. Instead, Russia appears content to maintain control without legal incorporation, using the regions as strategic leverage, especially whenever Georgia's NATO ambitions resurface. In South Ossetia's case, geography also complicates matters. The Caucasus mountain range separates North and South Ossetia, making full integration difficult even on paper. The prevailing assessment is this: Russia will continue to dominate South Ossetia and Abkhazia politically, economically, and militarily, but may never officially absorb them. And that reality reveals something deeper. These frozen conflicts are not accidents of history. They are tools, carefully preserved pressure points that Moscow can activate whenever the regional balance shifts. In the Caucasus, borders may look fixed on maps, but power, influence, and sovereignty remain very much in motion. South Ossetia and Abkhazia may look like small places on the map, but they sit at the center of a much bigger struggle between borders and power, sovereignty and influence. And as long as Georgia's future remains tied to NATO and Russia's red lines, these frozen conflicts are anything but frozen. If you found this breakdown useful, hit like, share it with someone who follows geopolitics, and subscribe for more deep dives like this. And let me know what you think. Do you believe Russia will ever formally absorb these regions, or are they meant to remain leveraged forever? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and let's start the discussion.